Some souls are such that before they die, they are so twisted that even after death they crave the suffering of the living, and today I am going to tell you a story. It is related to something like this, and the place I am going to talk about is in the heart of Las Vegas, Nevada, a city known for its bright lights, endless entertainment, and darker secrets that the tourists never see, and the name of the club is Club Number 13, located on a narrow, almost hidden alley off the famous Las Vegas Strip. If you have ever wandered past the neon signs and the bustling casinos late at night, you might have unknowingly passed right by this alley, but locals and certain underground workers will tell you that Club Number 13 is not just another strip club. It is a place where no one stays after midnight, and everyone who has ever gone inside swears they have felt something lurking in the shadows. And tonight I am going to tell you the story of Jason and his friends who stumbled into this nightmare almost by accident. And along with telling you this story, I also want to explain a bit about the club's history, because Club Number 13 has such a notorious past that even the bouncers refuse to speak about certain nights, because what happened there could turn anyone's blood cold. Guys, the club was originally built in the late 1970s and was notorious for a series of violent incidents, unsolved murders, and disappearances. It was remodeled in 2005 to look more upscale, with new lighting, air conditioning, and modern furniture, but locals say that these renovations were only meant to cover up the bloodstains, the hidden rooms, and the dark energy that still lingers inside. And Jason, who had recently turned 21, was celebrating his birthday with his closest group of friends, a tight-knit group who had known each other since high school, and as usual, they were all excited to do something wild and memorable for his birthday. After a few hours of debating what to do, they settled on something daring, something that would shock Jason but also thrill him, and that was to take him to Club Number 13, not just any night out, but a private VIP experience with one of the club's dancers, someone who was supposed to entertain him and make his birthday unforgettable. The plan seemed harmless enough at first, but what they did not know was that the VIP room they were assigned, Room 13, was the oldest and most haunted part of the entire club, a room that had been sealed for years and reopened only a few months ago. The moment Jason and his friends arrived at the alley leading to the club, it was already past 11 at night. The neon lights from the strip barely reached the shadowed alley, and a cold wind seemed to push against them as if warning them to turn back. The bouncer, a large man with tattoos covering his neck and arms, barely looked at them as he took their IDs and muttered something that sounded like a warning, but none of them understood. They laughed it off, thinking it was just part of the club's atmosphere. The interior of Club Number 13 was deceivingly normal, with loud music, dancers moving gracefully on the stage, patrons laughing and drinking, but there was an undercurrent of something wrong, something that made Jason feel uneasy almost immediately. The air smelled faintly of old perfume mixed with a metallic tang that he could not place, and even though the music was loud, there was a subtle echo in certain corners, like whispers bouncing off the walls. And as they were guided to Room 13 by a young woman with piercing eyes and an unnerving smile, Jason's friends tried to keep the mood light, joking about how creepy the alley looked, but the dancer leading them barely spoke and kept glancing over her shoulder as if someone was following them. The door to Room 13 was heavy, made of dark wood with faint scratches on the surface, and when she unlocked it she hesitated, her fingers trembling slightly, but she forced a smile and stepped aside, and the moment Jason entered the room, a chill ran down his spine. It was smaller than he expected but filled with expensive furniture, dim lighting, and mirrors that reflected the shadows in strange, distorted ways. The floor creaked under his feet even though it looked solid, and there was a faint sound, almost like a soft whisper coming from the far corner of the room, but Jason brushed it off as the music from the club leaking through the walls. He had no idea that the room had a history that no one dared to talk about openly. Room 13 had been the site of multiple disappearances over the decades. Several men had gone in and never come out, and some who returned were never the same. They were pale, quiet, and always looked over their shoulders as if something was following them. The previous dancer assigned to the room had quit abruptly after 3 nights, claiming she could hear voices, see shadows move against the mirrors, and sometimes feel a cold hand brush her shoulder even when no one was there. Jason's friends, oblivious to all this, encouraged him to sit, poured him a drink, and told him to relax, but as he sat down he could feel the temperature drop. A foggy sensation in the room made the air feel heavy and almost suffocating, and then it happened. At exactly midnight, the music outside the room faded slightly as if being swallowed, and Jason heard a whisper clearly this time, a voice that said his name, soft, almost playful, but underneath it was a menace that made his hair stand on end. He looked around frantically, trying to see who was there, but the dancer smiled nervously and told him it was just part of the act, but Jason could feel eyes on him, something unseen watching every move he made. The shadows in the mirrors started to stretch and twist in unnatural ways, and the light flickered in the corners, showing glimpses of shapes that should not exist, and his friends, thinking he was joking, nudged him and laughed, but Jason could not speak. His mouth felt dry. His heart pounded, and he realized that the room itself seemed alive, breathing with him, waiting for him to make a mistake, and then a low thud came from the back of the room, the sound of something heavy moving, and Jason froze completely. The dancer turned pale and whispered, "It's here," and just like that, the door clicked shut behind them, and the lock engaged on its own. There was no key, no explanation, only the thick, suffocating silence of a room that had been waiting decades for someone like Jason. He tried to move, but his legs felt glued to the floor. The mirrors reflected shadows that should not have been there, and the temperature dropped further, a cold wind circling him in the confined space. He could feel breathing on the back of his neck even though no one was behind him, and then the whisper returned, louder this time, almost directly in his ear, "You shouldn't have come." And Jason wanted to scream, but his voice was swallowed by the darkness of the room, and this was only the beginning, only the first moments of a night that would leave him questioning reality and wondering if he would ever leave Club Number 13 alive. And it was a story told to me personally by a man who said he witnessed everything, who confirmed the location, the timing, and the eerie sensations that no words could ever truly capture. And as he described the alley, the club, and the cursed room, I could feel a chill creeping down my spine. And now, this story begins fully, the terror of Club Number 13 in Las Vegas, a place where no one stays after midnight, and a room that feeds on fear itself. Jason's heart raced as the shadows in room 13 seemed to shift and grow larger with every passing second, the mirrors reflecting not only him and the dancer but shapes that twisted in impossible angles, some vaguely human, others grotesque, and the soft whispering that had begun at midnight intensified into a low chorus of voices that echoed around the room, overlapping each other so that he could barely distinguish one from the other. The dancer, her face pale and strained, tried to calm him, telling him it was just the club's acoustics, but Jason knew better. He could feel something watching, something waiting for the perfect moment. He reached for the small drink on the table, hoping that sipping it would ground him in reality, but when his hand touched the glass, it rattled violently on its own, and a cold, heavy breeze seemed to brush across his fingers, sending chills up his arm. His friends, still outside the locked room, could hear the faint muffled sounds of his panic, but they had no idea what was happening inside. And then it began, the first real sign that room 13 was alive with something other than the living. The lights flickered and dimmed, plunging the room into semi-darkness, and the mirrors started to fog as if breathing onto themselves, swirling shapes forming behind the glass, figures of men and women with hollow eyes, some screaming silently, some reaching out as if trying to warn him. And Jason could feel the panic rising in his chest, his throat tight, but he could not look away from the reflections. He tried to move to the door but it would not budge, the handle refusing to turn. The lock itself seemed fused into the wood, and then he heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing across the floor from the back of the room. But when he turned, no one was there. The dancer behind him shivered visibly, whispering, "He's here," and the cold grew unbearable. Frost forming on the edges of the mirrors, condensation dripping down like tears, and then a voice, deep, guttural, almost human but distorted, spoke directly to him, "You shouldn't have come," and Jason felt an icy hand grip his shoulder. No, not felt, but sensed, a presence that was heavier than any human weight, pressing down on his very chest, making it hard to breathe. He fell to his knees, gasping, trying to scream, but the sound died in his throat. The mirrors reflected him kneeling, but also another version of him, pale, hollow-eyed, twisted into a grotesque expression, staring back with accusation. And the dancer grabbed his arm, trying to pull him toward the corner, but every movement he made seemed slower, as if time itself resisted him. Then came the scratching, at first faint, like fingernails across wood, then louder, as if someone, or something, was clawing from inside the walls, and Jason realized the sounds were coming from everywhere at once, from the ceiling, the floor, and especially from the mirrors, which now seemed to shimmer and pulse with something alive. The whispers became clearer, fragmented sentences of past horrors. He killed us. We never left. Beware the door. Midnight comes for you, and Jason felt bile rising in his throat as the air thickened, heavy with the smell of something old, iron, blood, and decay. The dancer screamed softly, backing into him, her eyes wide with terror, and he turned to her, trying to find comfort in another human presence, but the reflection in the mirrors showed her with a different face, her eyes black voids. And Jason realized then that the room did not want him alone, it wanted him to see, to understand the weight of what had happened there over decades. Men and women had come for pleasure and left with screams, some never leaving at all, their spirits trapped, twisted by the club's cursed history, and Jason could feel them reaching, pressing, whispering, circling. He tried to move toward the far corner where a small table sat with a drink he had not noticed before, as if some instinct drove him. But each step he took made the floorboards groan unnaturally, vibrating beneath his feet, like the room itself was breathing. He reached the table, trembling, and when he looked down, the drink was gone, replaced by a single playing card, the king of spades, its edges smeared with a dark substance that looked like blood. Jason wanted to drop it, to run, but the card seemed glued to his hand, and then the air shifted, warmer now, suffocatingly close, and he could hear whispers from the mirrors, forming words directed only at him: stay. Join. Forever. He felt a pressure on his head, a pounding like thousands of invisible fingers striking his skull, images flashing in his mind, scenes of people who had entered room 13 over the years, men who had laughed, women who had danced, all ending in horror, and Jason felt a pull, like invisible hands dragging him toward the center of the room, toward a spot that seemed to pulse with dark energy. The dancer screamed again, trying to pull him back, but her hands passed through him, as if she were not even there. And then the door slammed open on its own, a shadowy figure standing in the threshold, impossibly tall, wearing a tattered suit, its face featureless, save for two glowing red eyes that pierced through Jason. He fell backward onto the floor, unable to move, unable to breathe, as the figure slowly approached, the whispers growing into a deafening roar, echoing off the walls and mirrors, filling his mind with images of decay, death, and endless night. Jason's vision blurred. His thoughts fragmented, and he understood in that instant that room 13 did not simply haunt its victims, it consumed them, it fed on their fear, their desire, their soul, and the only way to survive was to escape before the clock struck 1, but he could not see a way out, the figure now only a few feet away, and the mirrors surrounding him showing multiple versions of himself, all screaming silently. And then, in a moment of clarity, he remembered something the man who told me this story said: the room waits for someone to break, to see them cry, to hear their regret, and then it takes them. And Jason realized that he had almost given in, almost allowed himself to fall into the dark embrace of club number 13, and just as the figure raised an impossibly long arm, the faint sound of the club's music outside returned, breaking the silence slightly, a distraction that allowed Jason to muster the strength to roll sideways, hitting the corner of the room, and the mirrors shimmered violently, but he was able to stumble toward the door, fumbling desperately with the handle, the lock clicking open just as the clock outside struck 12:30. He threw the door open and ran into the main hall of the club, gasping for air. The bouncer looked at him with a knowing expression but said nothing. The dancer behind him disappeared into the shadows, and Jason did not stop running until he was outside, back in the cold alley where the neon lights of the strip barely reached. His friends were waiting, shocked at his pale, trembling face. He tried to speak but only managed a hoarse whisper: never go inside room 13, and they took him home. But Jason knew, and the man who told me this story confirmed, that club number 13 waits, it watches, and those who think they are brave enough to enter its VIP rooms are often mistaken. And the most terrifying part is that room 13 is patient, it remembers, and it hungers for more. And now, my friends, if you want to hear what happens next, how the spirits inside room 13 begin to follow Jason even outside the club, and how the night turns into something far darker than you can imagine, make sure you do not miss part 3, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell because the story is far from over, and the terror has only just begun.